waiting for Sibisa to finish with the call. Maybe when you start with the meeting. Good morning, colleagues. Can we have maybe 2 minutes for everyone to settle down? Those that wants to go get something, they can do it before we start with the meeting. Just for members and all the colleagues to settle down, because I see others are still coming in.
Can you pass this on? Busi hasn't signed. Busi hasn't. Busi hasn't signed.
A very good morning to all the colleagues. Our colleagues from PBO, I see National Treasury is with us today. I see Comrade Pax is in the meeting. Honorable members, members of the public, and any other colleague that is in the meeting with us today, a very good morning to you. Today's meeting is a continuation of all the meetings that we had previously, where the PBO will be briefing the committee, or will be giving insight on the 3 bills that we have been discussing since the last 3 weeks. We've had an opportunity to meet with the National Treasury, the FFC, SALGA on the same bills, the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriations Bill, and the Eskom Bill. So I will not waste time. I saw the presentation of the PBO is quite lengthy. Members might have received their agenda on time, but I'm going to request that we make slight changes, because previously the committee has raised concerns on the issues of misallocation of funds between the Northwest and the Northern Cape. And I would want to afford a space for National Treasury to give us a response on how they are going to resolve on that matter. So I'm going to give to Mr. Nodada to come up with the apologies, and then we'll go straight into giving an opportunity to National Treasury. But before National Treasury comes in, I want to put it before the committee that apparently this was not the first mistake. A similar situation was experienced in 2012, and there was a way in which it was rectified. I will ask Mr. Nodada to take us through, and then hand over to Makaurekwe to give us detail on how they are going to resolve the issues. Mr. Nodada, you'll start with the apologies, and maybe take the committee members through on how previously the issue was dealt with, and then hand over to Mekhaorekwe to take us through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members, professors, and colleagues. Chair, with respect to apologies, we received an apology from Deputy Minister Surepan. He is attending the Standing Committee on Appropriations meeting that is sitting at the same time as this meeting. We also received an apology from Mr. Khatebe. He will join the committee 30 minutes late. We also have an apology from Mr. Ryder. He has been called to another meeting which is going to start at 11 o'clock. So Mr. Ryder might leave just before 11. Thank you so much, Chair. Chairperson, with respect to the National Treasury issue, with your permission, I would like to request that we give National Treasury the opportunity to explain it first, because we have interacted and then I realized that Ms. Khaorekwe has got more information. She's going to cover what I thought I was going to cover. So there might not be a need for me to explain the matter. Thank you, Chair.
Noted, and I think the suggestion is proper. Mekhaorekwe.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, honorable members and Chair and colleagues in the room. So, Chair, as members will recall that in the Division of Revenue, we've got 7 schedules. So a number of them are part of the Act once the Act is enacted. So CASP, in this case, is part of Schedule 5A. Therefore, it's part of the conditional grants allocations for each province breakdown is part of the main body, if you like, of the Act. So once the Act is enacted, those allocations are part of this. But in the case of the municipalities, the 2012 era that happened at the time, as it happened between the 2 municipalities at a particular point in time. So what is it contained in the main body of the Act, if you like, as part of Schedule 5B for municipalities, is the total amount and not the breakdown per municipality. So therefore, if there is a mistake on the breakdown per municipality, that can be done in terms of Section 15.1 of the Division of Revenue, where we just gazette those numbers. But in the case of CASP, because it forms part of the Act, once the Act is enacted, it can be done in 2 ways, the correction of this. So can be done through Parliament by amending that schedule, amendment to the bill, so that when the President signs, these corrections are made, or it could be done through the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. So that's what I wanted to indicate, Chair, that so it's not like the one of the municipalities where it's just we do the gazette within National Treasury. But maybe just to indicate what has since happened on our side, so that the monies don't go to the wrong people. So what we have done, even the National Department, because the error was from their side, what they have done, they've since alerted the provinces and given them new allocation letters. And we've also done the same from our side. And in addition to that, we're going to make sure that as we do the payment schedule, because we do a payment schedule as required by Division of Revenue, to transfer the money on either monthly or quarterly, whichever way the sector has agreed to. So in terms of that payment schedule, we're going to ensure that the money that goes, Northern Cape does not get more than it shouldn't have. So, and Northwest will get coding. But obviously, if this process is not done through this parliamentary process now, and is done through the amendment, therefore it will be done that time. But if it's done, Parliament amend this Schedule 5A allocations now, then it means our payment schedule will be aligned to what Parliament has approved. I hope it's clear, Chair. Can I pause there?
Have you sufficiently responded? Because I can't say it's enough when you are not satisfied yourself.
No, I'm fine from my side.
Okay, colleagues, I think I'm going to give members a few minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, maybe if they have clarity seeking questions. But I want to know in terms of consequence management. It can't be that such errors prevail and we take it as normal and you, National Treasury, you now put Parliament, even though it's part of our Parliament, into a process that would have been avoided if you did your work thoroughly. So I just want to check what is then going to happen. Is an error is going to be rectified and we continue as usual. But I'm going to give chance to members who may want to have clarity on what you've just presented the committee with. Honorable Ngumalo, Honorable Ndlovu, Honorable Siwisa, in that order.
No, thank you
Colleagues,
very-
I'm only going to take one round of hands.
No,
So
thank-
if your hand is not up, please do not be provoked. I'll not give you another round to can engage on what have just been presented. Mr. Brett, you'll be the last.
No, thank you very much, Chair, and my greetings to you and all the honorable members, our PBOs and supporting staff. Chairperson, I just want to find out as to what is the committee or the PBO going to do to avoid this error in the future, because really is something that is disturbing to find out that it's a human error and it will affect the whole province or the country. Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable Chair, and good morning to everyone, PBO, National Treasury, members of Parliament and staff. Chair, I think I agree with you in terms of consequence management. What I want to emphasize is to indicate that, you know, the current situation, Chair, whereby everything is about money. I think even if in your house, when there is a money, it's either your husband or your wife take the money to something else. You will also want to find out why you did this without consulting me. And the question was, if the Parliament or the committee couldn't trace that, and then it was business as usual, and it seems that there is a lot of ignorance that one can just say there are a lot of things or errors that might have happened. So we just wanted to check, as I emphasized your question, Chair, on the issue of consequence management and who, I'm not sure if the Mehaorek, is it the proper panel here or the committee to indicate the unit or the person who's involved on this whole thing. Thanks very much.
Siwisa.
No, thank you, Chair. Greetings, Office of the PBO, National Treasury. You know, Chair, this thing, it becomes difficult to deal with such a thing because we made National Treasury aware that we are aware of this, and they should have, I get a feeling that they should have done something at that moment. Because we went through the fiscal framework, we did whatever, now we are dealing with the division of revenue. And now we are going to embark on a process that should have been avoided in the first place. And I agree with you, Chair, that there should be consequence management because now we have to amend our schedule because of somebody decided not to do their work in the National Treasury and reprove whatever that is going to be sent to this committee. And I said it, Chair, the last time, I think the NCOP select finance and appropriation. We are the only ones that actually sit in both, so we know what's happening. The left-hand side knows what the right-hand side is doing. My question would be, is the National Assembly aware of this? Or do we also have to brief them, then National Treasury is going to brief them? Because I don't think that they are aware of this unless they heard it in one of the joint finance sittings, committee meetings, where I think I've raised it even during the fiscal framework. So there needs to be a chair, because if it came to your attention, Chairperson, that in 2012 the same thing happened, you ask yourself what worse is going to happen after this. Because according to explanation, it was municipality to municipality. Now it's province to province. One day it's going to be department to department. And we are going to spend money that is not there to redo a process that could have been avoided. So I'm even afraid to ask if there were any consequence managements that were applied in 2012. And if none, but we need to start consequence management needs to be part of any mistake that happens. We are here to do our job, even though we do have disagreements sometimes, but we are here to make sure that the processes go accordingly, Chair. And I fully agree with you that heads needs to roll. There's no other way we are going to. Somebody needs to take accountability, and there should be consequence management that is being applied. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Sivisa. Honorable Brett, you are the last.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I'm not going to have any engagement, but a reasonable request, and that is that the response that we received from National Treasury now be put in writing and circulated to the committee members by close of business today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, before I give you to respond, in one of the joint meeting, we made a proposal as a committee that the minister should look at section 14 of the Money Bills Act, which deals with rectifying all the technical errors that might arise. I want to check with you, why is it that that was not effected by the minister and it has to come back to Parliament for us to rectify it? Over to you, Mekharekwe.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So maybe just to indicate, starting with Honorable Suisa's question, is the NA aware? Yes, they are aware. There's a letter that has been written by the minister, and the chair of this committee also received that letter, that where the minister is firstly apologizing for this, and I think asking the committee to the committees to correct it through the parliamentary processes. So in terms of what are we going to do to avoid this error? So right now we are reviewing our quality controls so that we avoid this kind of issue in the future, because even from our side, obviously it's an embarrassing issue. So we didn't want to seem not to be knowing what we're doing. So from our side, we're going to review the processes. So, but just to say that in terms of consequence management, so obviously currently this is done by the division that I'm responsible for at the moment. So therefore, I think DG and the minister, they'll have to indicate what are the consequences, because I can't answer for what my division has done at the moment. So I take full responsibility for what has happened here. So Chair, I'll check on this one, section 14, in terms of why we, but so then we'll have to action it as soon as possible. But I do take Honorable Brett's request that the response be put in writing, so we can do that, that we circulate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. I think for now, that's how we will keep it. But as Honorable Brett should have indicated that maybe the explanation must be put down in writing, I suspect members want to do their own consultation on the matter. So I would gladly request you to do the same. And kindly make your consultations today on section 14, because we would want to know as the committee whether we'll be embarking on the process to rectify the error or what. I'm not going to take long, members. I'm going to straight go to PBO to give us their presentation. And we saw it's such a lengthy presentation, colleagues. I am going to request PBO to talk to the slides rather than going word by word on the presentation, to allow members enough chance to can engage on the presentations, and also to allow members to deal with matters that are of their concern pertaining the day-to-day running of the committee. So immediately after the engagement with your good selves, you'll be allowed to leave and members of the committee will remain behind. Over to you, Mr. Jantjies.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all members and colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to present just to clarify, we had not changed the slides. We're covering all the 3 bills as per request, just to make sure. I see we're only saying the division of revenue analysis. Oh my goodness, okay. I will try to move quite quickly, but I think we will talk to the slides, not to the bullet points. I think the key thing here is to re-emphasize, because I mean our view is that this is a first budget for the term, so it's very important to ensure the proper alignment that takes place, particularly looking at the interplay between all the four instruments. The other one impacts the other following that. We know we adopted fiscal framework last week. I think we do often start by really highlighting some of the socio-economic realities which in our view, the budget has to be talking to those. So we do try to start by showing the social analysis. But also we do emphasize the importance of ensuring the alignments within the 3 spheres. But I think more importantly, the impact of the budget within dealing with some of the issues. We do also highlight socio-economic issues. We do also highlight the financial health and challenges of the municipalities. And also, more importantly, to see whether the division of revenue and appropriations bill how likely are they to address some of these challenges. We also highlight some of the findings from our section 139 preliminary findings, which links quite well with the discussion here. We also look at the issues around the equitable shares implications for the service delivery as well. Our presentation will provide analysis to whether the allocation itself are appropriately targeted to address socio-economic challenges, as I mentioned, within the context of where we are and what the broader objectives of the budget as a whole. The extent to which the division of revenue, we look at equitable allocations, conditional grants, and various instruments that really use to try to address these measures. And again, we want to draw members close to remember the broader development strategies and whether there is a very clear alignment with the budget itself. So that's really our main message going forward. Thank you so much. I'll just give, who's coming in? Kagiso to take us through the next section. I think I'm skipping these sections. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Jantjies. Good morning, honorable members. I will be taking you through the situational analysis across the 3 spheres of government. The purpose of this section is to provide an overview of the socio-economic realities currently facing South Africa. When you further deliberate on the division of revenue as well as the appropriations bill, it's important that your decisions are grounded within the socio-economic context currently facing our country. Next slide, please. So Budget 2025 marked an increase in some function groups since the 2024 MTBPS. However, the scale of the proposed budget adjustment for several function groups may be insufficient to address the backlogs that have constrained the public sector. In 2025, the real average cost of household food basket increased by 73 Rand from 5,079 to 5,152. This increase exceeds the proposed real increase in child as well as foster care grants presented in the 2025 budget. If you look on the graph, at the bottom 2 bars on the right-hand side of the slide, the current average cost of household food basket exceeds the value of all social grants and the national minimum wage. This gap leaves many vulnerable households at risk of hunger and nutritional insecurity. Next slide, please. In the budget, the National Treasury committed to protecting vulnerable households from the impact of the proposed VAT increase through expanding the list of zero-rated food items and not increasing the food levy. However, we argue that these measures alone may not sufficiently protect vulnerable households from the broader inflationary effects of VAT increase. A report by the Competition Commission indicated that retail prices of essential foods remain stubbornly high despite lower producer costs such as decrease in fuel prices. This indicates that retailers are not sufficiently passing on savings to consumers, and this behavior by retailers undermines protective measures. Honourable members, as highlighted in the first two bars of the graph below, low-income households typically spend over 68% of their income on necessities such as food, water, electricity, and housing, and so an increase in VAT will disproportionately burden low-income households. Next slide, please. While social grants have improved food security for millions of people, significant challenges remain. The latest statistics show that around 9.3 million people experienced hunger. In the 1990s, 1 in 4 children in South Africa was chronically malnourished, and in the 2020s, or currently, 1 in 4 children are still chronically malnourished, which highlights the need for effective social protection measures. The graph on the right-hand side shows that households primarily dependent on grants as their main source of income experience notably higher severe food insecurity. Female-headed households had higher rates of food insecurity than male-headed households. In this context, we had hoped that the budget would have included a sound policy initiative that incorporated gender responsiveness in public spending decisions, an area, honourable members, that our colleagues at the PBO have written on. At a provincial lens, food access problems were most common in the Northern Cape, Northwest, as well as Mpumalanga. Next slide, please. Honourable members, the argument in the budget that South Africa's VAT is low compared to peer countries fails to acknowledge our extreme income and wealth inequality. This slide shows that in South Africa, the bottom half of the population holds negative wealth. Meanwhile, the top 10% holds over 85% of the total wealth, which is a concerning disparity. By contrast, peer countries used by the National Treasury for comparisons have relatively less concentrated wealth and income, making people within these countries less vulnerable relatively to the regressive effects of higher indirect taxes. Next slide, please. South Africa's Gini coefficient, which measures inequality on a scale from 0 to 1, places South Africa at 0.63, making us the most unequal among countries National Treasury compares us to in the budget. The inequality is especially pronounced along racial lines, as you can see on the graph shown on the right-hand side. The graph shows that 73% of white-headed households are located in the upper quintile, compared to nearly 14% of black-headed households. Again, against this backdrop, the regressive revenue-raising measures that were proposed in the budget 2025 are likely to exacerbate inequality across racial lines and even gender lines. I'll ask my colleague Razikazi to present the next few slides, and then I'll come back to conclude the section. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Kagiso. Honourable members, since the onset of austerity measures in 2012, South Africa's official unemployment rate, the expanded unemployment rate, and the youth unemployment rate, which is described as a ticking time bomb, increased, and this signifies a crisis that cannot be ignored. The proposed VAT increase is justified in the budget by comparing our VAT rate to countries with higher VAT. However, these countries have far lower unemployment rates, ranging from 3% to 13.4% in 2024. So this means that people within these countries have jobs and they have an income. Next slide, please. So in the budget, National Treasury emphasized that key spending increases will be directed to critical frontline services, such as crime prevention. The budget for this function increased by 6.3% in nominal terms. However, despite this increase in funding, the number of funded posts remains unchanged over 188,000 throughout the next 3 years, and this represents a reduction of over 9,800 posts since 2012. So, honourable members, this is deeply concerning, particularly as South Africa recorded more than 75 murders per day in the most recent quarterly statistics. Although the recent quarterly statistics show the decrease in various categories of crime, there's still a need to capacitate our law enforcement. Next slide, please. Honorable members, I will not dwell much on the slide, but I just want to draw your attention on the bottom graph. This graph shows the police to citizen ratio. There is one police officer for every 402 citizens. Next slide, please. So in terms of higher education, this graph compares the number of new first-year university applications, which is in light green, against the number that universities can accept, which is in dark green. And already by looking at this graph, you can see the concern around capacity for universities. I'll talk more in this graph on the next slide. Next slide, please. So this slide and the previous slide, honorable members, show that our higher education system relies on a limited number of universities. And if I could draw your attention on the orange bar graph, you will see that over 135,000 matriculants who achieved bachelor passes were unable to settle placements in public universities, primarily due to capacity constraints. For example, the University of Johannesburg, as of January 2025, they received 360,000 applications for first-year admissions, but could only accommodate 10,500 students. So many of our public universities face severe constraints in expanding their physical infrastructure to accommodate and increase student enrollment. And so the reduction in subsidies for university infrastructure may further exacerbate the pressures on overall university capacity, including the availability of student housing. Next slide, please. I'll hand over back to my colleague, Kagiso, to take you through the next slide.
Thank you, Lwazi. Honourable members, in the budget, the National Treasury noted that the revenue generated from the new tax measures will help fund critical key priority areas such as basic education, including ECD programs. And so over the medium term, basic education funding will increase nominally by 61 billion rand. The funding is intended to retain teachers, expand ECD access, increase subsidies to schools, and so forth. However, despite this positive step, the reality is the funding increase falls short from repairing the years of spending reductions, which have contributed to the pressures provincial education departments continue to face with teacher shortages, infrastructure challenges, and difficulties in implementing mandatory directives. By 2024, there were 35 learners per educator. This is up from 34 learners per educator in 2023. It's important to note, honourable members, that South Africa's learner-to-educator ratio does mask disparities. There are some reports that have found that some teacher in quintile 1 school face classes of over 50 to 60 learners in a lesson. South Africa's average 35 learners to 1 educator ratio is higher than countries with lower VAT rates. Next slide, please, Professor. Turning on to healthcare, reports indicate that South Africa has only 0.31 doctors per 1,000 patients, meaning that each doctor is responsible for more than 3,100 patients. This ratio is likely to be significantly more worse in rural areas. We lag behind China, Malaysia, the UAE, and other countries that have lower VAT rates. Although the World Health Organization has not set a definitive global standard on the doctor-to-patient ratio, a 2006 World Health Report recommended that at least 2.3 healthcare workers per 1,000 patients. Additionally, new medical graduates outpace the proposed funding allocation for 2025, as there are 1,500 to 1,800 unemployed post-community service doctors, which undermines the very fabric of our healthcare system. Next slide, please. I won't go into great detail on these next two slides, as there's a detailed analysis on local government later. However, I do want to highlight that despite some progress in delivering basic services, the number of people without access to water and refuse disposal has increased. Last year, nearly half of all treated clean water in South Africa was lost due to factors such as leaks, poor maintenance, and neglected infrastructure. The proposal in the budget 2025 for mobilizing resources through private sector partnership for infrastructure development, while potentially beneficial, raises concerns about the long-term affordability of basic services. We thus caution that affordability, especially for essential services like water, must remain a priority in such partnerships. Next slide. The last slide, honourable members, looks at the findings from the latest Auditor General report. According to this latest report, 13% of municipalities obtain clean audits, down from 15% of municipalities. While audit outcomes are important indicators, it is critical to assess municipalities beyond audit results, such as evaluating the real impact of municipalities on community. Currently, financial challenges have led to situations in 4 provinces where municipalities could not pay employee salaries. The affected workers include those that are providing essential services, which directly affects service delivery. I'll now hand over to my next colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Kagiso. Next slide, please. So members, the Division of Revenue Bill provides for the equitable division of nationally raised revenue between the 3 spheres of government. These diagrams show the actual outcomes of the Division of Revenue between 2021-22 and 2025-26. The aim of government is to increase the proportion of transfers to provincial and local government spheres of government. And you can see over time there is an increase in the proportion of the division of revenue allocated to provinces and local government. Next slide. The nominal growth per sphere of government over the medium term is 3.1% for national departments, 4.5% for provinces, and 4.4% for local government. The real per capita spending is however declining over the 2025 MTEF. Next slide. So of the 49.1% allocated to the national sphere of government, national government transfers...
Kindly try and talk to the mic. Come closer to the mic.
Okay. Over the store. Okay, better. Of the 49.1% allocated to the national sphere of government, national government transfers 66.9% to other institutions, of which 5.9% is allocated to provinces, 2.4% to local government, and then 58.7% is transferred to other institutions. Next slide. The 9.5% of the nationally raised revenue allocated to local government in 2024-25 amounted to approximately 168 billion, which accounted for 20.5% of total municipal revenue. The balance of 652.3 billion was made up of own revenue raised by municipalities. When own revenue raised by local government is added to the division of revenue, the local government share amounts to 34% of total revenue collection within the 3 spheres of government. Next slide. Next. So members, the table shows the national appropriations that increased by more than inflation between 2024-25 and 25-26. These are the numbers from the Appropriations Bill. So most of the increases in national departments and also in provinces are actually due to the public wage agreement. And another addition to these allocations were the COVID-19 SRD grant, the modernization of SARS, the teacher assistant program in basic education, and then there was transfers to South African Roads Agency to cover the debt repayments, the Passenger Rail Agency of SA for the rolling stock fleet renewal. Additional funding was allocated for the water trading entity, and then there was also additional funding allocated for the IDC for the Social Employment Fund. Next slide. In total, national departments transfer 66.9% of their appropriations. They appropriate 31.9% for current spending, of which 9.6% is for compensation of employees. On a national level, they only allocate 0.7% to capital expenditure. So remember, this table shows the departments that transfer more than 60% of the appropriations to other institutions. Next slide. In terms of the conditional grants, the largest proportion of conditional grants to provinces is for education, health, human settlements, and transport. The largest proportion of conditional grants transferred from national departments to municipalities is for municipal infrastructure and human settlements. Next slide. The allocations to provinces from the equitable share show that on average, Gauteng will receive the biggest proportion of the provincial equitable share, 21% over the next 3 years. KZN, the second largest at 20.3%, and the Eastern Cape receives 13%. These proportions are determined by the equitable share formula. In addition to these allocations, provisional allocations in the budget will be made available to provinces during the 2025-26 financial year and over the medium term. These allocations will be subject to the fulfillment of specific conditions or the completion of outstanding planning administrative processes. So members, these provisional allocations has not been included in any of these bills, the Division of Revenue or the Appropriations Bill. Next slide. The proportions of total provincial spending per function. In total, provinces allocate 41.6% to education, 34.1% to health, and 2.9% to social development, and the other sectors receive the remaining 21.3%. Proportions allocated for education vary between 36.6% and 48.2% between the different provinces. The largest proportion of 39.1% is allocated for health in Gauteng. Next slide. The table shows the provincial conditional grants and revisions made to the specifically for efficiency gains. I won't read through all of them, but there was a lot of changes made in terms of the conditional grants that has been reviewed specifically because of duplication, and those duplication has now been addressed. Next slide. These are the conditional grants. It's also showing there was quite a few revisions to these grants made also for efficiency gains over time. Next slide. I'll hand over to my colleague.
Honourable members, as usual, you know that the PBO does real per capita analysis on expenditure. The budget is written in nominal terms, so it does not take into account inflation and population growth. Compared to the 2024 MTBPS, the numbers are looking better, which means that we're not seeing as extreme fiscal consolidation as was previously reported. But I think what I really want members to think about in this section is how the VAT increase is also going to impact government spending and expenditure. A lot has been said about how VAT impacts households, but government also procures goods and services which are VAT rated. So which means that these provisions that we're looking at here are also going to be impacted by VAT, and therefore we're not seeing as high of expenditure as we would like to see if we're going to be investing in expanding basic services. In this next slide, please. Here it's the same with economic classification, just to say again that the numbers are increasing. However, we're not seeing a significant increase in real terms compared to the 2024 MTBPS. And a big part of this economic classification budget that members should take note of is that there's a considerable change in what the contingency reserve was supposed to be. So the contingency reserve for 27-28 was supposed to be 20.8 billion. However, it has now been adjusted downwards to 11.1 billion for that year, and the contingency reserve for 2025-26 was supposed to be 7.6 billion as per the MTBPS. However, this has also been revised downwards to 5 billion. Next slide, please. Here, we always emphasize on how the idea of there's no such thing as a social wage, as the entirety of the budget is a social wage, and that those who actually have better access are those who are better off than those who don't have access, right? So people in rural areas who are further away from hospitals do not have the same access to quote unquote the social wage as those who are already in proximity. Here, we're highlighting that in 2021-22, in 2023-24, the real per capita social wage declined. Again, these numbers are also increasing as per the previous slides in functional groups. However, the numbers are not increasing significantly. And we want to highlight that there remains a significant backlog in public basic service provisioning. So it is important that proposals consider the real per capita declines over time so that we can project better for the future. Next slide, on make better investments. In this slide, we highlight health specifically. So health as well is increasing as opposed to the previous MTPPS. However, here we want to highlight to members that in health, inflation, medical prices inflation is on average 9.5%, which is the estimate for 2025. However, we've increased our budget inflation adjacent, so at about 4.4%, 4.5%, and whatever the inflation was in previous years. So the health budget has been eroded and will continue to be eroded by medical price inflation. Coming from COVID, I think we all know the importance of investing in the medical sector, but also for members to be aware that the current budget does not include PEPFAR and USAID, which has obviously been withdrawn. So the question about how will we factor in that expenditure into our budget, how will we preserve the programs that we might lose, including in research, HIV research in particular, is an important conversation, and we expect that the MTPPS will include these numbers. However, discussions are still ongoing, and I think it's important for members to ask National Treasury how those negotiations are currently being undertaken. Next slide, please. In this slide, we're showing real per capita spending per learner. Again, this is increasing, and this is largely driven by increased allocations to the ECD sector, which we welcome, but also highlights that as other civil society organizations and other researchers have highlighted, that, for example, the subsidy wasn't increased from 17 Rand in 2019, so it's also been eroded by inflation. So even though we are seeing an increase in the subsidy, it's not as big as it looks because it's already been eroded by inflation over time. And I mean, the question is 21 Rand per child per day sufficient nutritiously for us to address what my colleagues were highlighting, the malnutrition issues in our country specifically, but also to say that there's significant backlogs in the healthcare sector. As we know, we've been talking about pit latrines, we've been talking about teacher ratios, as my colleagues have already highlighted. So even though the budget is increasing, there's severe backlogs that we are being faced with that need to be addressed. Next slide, please. And here, in the budget, what is highlighted is that the increase in social grants is what will buffer households from the VAT increase, but to highlight to members that the actual real increases in the social grants are only 1.5%. So when we look at the numbers in the budget, it says 5.9%, but that's the nominal number. When you include inflation, they're only increasing by 1.5%, and in fact, the child support and grant in aid grants are only increasing by 1.3%. We've highlighted that because the COVID-19 SRD grant has not been adjusted, it has been significantly eroded by inflation since 2020-21. Its current value is now only 293 rands. We also highlight that the child support grant remains below the food poverty line, and in a context where children, remain malnutritioned and so forth, it is important that the child support grant is considered, or an increase is considered, because 30 Rand doesn't adequately address the shortfall of that. And as already my colleagues highlighted, that households that are grant recipients are actually more vulnerable to hunger than other households. So grants remain important. However, this expansion is not enough to buffer from the VAT increases as well as the cost of living crisis that we currently face. Next slide, please. I'll now lastly talk about infrastructure. This is my last slide. Here to highlight to members that gross fixed capital formation in infrastructure has actually been declining. All our budgets have hinged on infrastructure as our way of growing. However, we have not been adequately investing in infrastructure, even though it is a priority area. Just to highlight to members there that general government economic infrastructure between 2015 and 2023 has actually declined by almost 40%. So if we say this is how we will grow, yet we do not invest in how we say we will grow, we cannot then say whether it's working or not. So it questions the credibility of our growth strategy as well. But as we all know, there's infrastructure spending has been inadequate, and there's significant backlog. I think if members specifically look at the natural disasters that have happened, the backlogs there, housing and basic infrastructure, these are increasing as further severe climate events happen in our society. Next slide, please. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Mukundi.
Thank you. Good morning once again, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. I'm just going to take you briefly through the municipal overview section. Next slide, please. Yeah, basically on this slide, we just highlighted some key issues that the president himself highlighted during the SONA. Municipal challenges. This then shows that government is fully aware of the challenges that are facing municipality, which is service delivery issues around infrastructure, lack of technical expertise, insufficient investment in infrastructure, maintenance, weak and poor governance structures, fragmented government approaches. All these issues, if you were to check any research paper, you will find these issues come all the time. So the issue is now how the government is addressing these areas of concern. Next slide, please. This slide just shows, focusing specifically on 2024-2025, on the revenue generated across the country by municipality, but categorized per province. Then you will see that from this slide that most revenue is raised in Gauteng, where they've got 3 metros. In KwaZulu-Natal, they've got a metro. Eastern Cape, they also have a metro, as well as the Western Cape. So this is then it all fits into the presentation that my colleagues did, what they were talking to earlier on around issues of unemployment, poverty, and employment. So those areas that are not adequately or are able to raise revenue, they will always continue to face challenges with regards to those triple challenges. So you can see on the right side there's few pie, two pie showing operating revenue as well as capital revenue. You will see that most revenue comes from service charges for your water, for your services, from property rates. So those two items, most rural municipalities don't actually are unable to raise that type of revenue. Next slide, please. This slide as well just shows the same type with the same number of expenditure that the 649 billion is typically used for. It's mostly going to metropolitan areas because they are able to raise revenue, they're able to go to the market to borrow. Rural municipalities do not. So they're able to attract more qualified engineers, more qualified skills and expertise. That's why you will always see metros performing a bit better than local government. You will always see more people trying to migrate towards those areas because rural areas are not actually adequately capacitated. Next slide, please. This slide just shows where the funding, where the expenditure is. You will see that almost 29% is spent on employee-related costs, including the remuneration of councillors. So municipalities, indeed, most of them, they try by all means to pay salaries, even if they don't do any other type of service delivery. So that's an area of concern. Obviously, if the government is investing a huge amount on human resources, it's we expect that to get some benefit from it, so that those people then tend to be productive and add value. Bulk purchases for electricity, municipalities spend a lot of money buying electricity from organizations like Eskom for the purpose of resale. So they buy the electricity, the consumers use it, then they don't pay. That's where then they get into the debt spiral situations where they can't even be able to service their debts, where they can't even have money to invest back into the infrastructure. Those are the issues that are highlighted. It's just a matter of how government is going to address those issues. Another issue before I move on is the issue around consultants. You find that most municipalities, although they are paying for compensation of employees, they also go out to the market to get other consultants to actually do the work that those people are employed for. So that's also an area of concern. Next slide, please. On this slide, we're just highlighting where the capital budget is going. Mostly it goes towards issues like we indicated, for electricity, waste management, infrastructure, economic services, building bridge, public transport, and all that stuff. So this is the same expenditures, just that it's broken down to show areas where the municipalities are investing. Thank you. Next slide. In this slide, my colleague has already touched on a number of infrastructure grants that are available to local government, and this is the performance over the next few years. So you would see that grants like the municipal infrastructure grant, they grow by at least 20 billion over the MTech to be used to provide a much needed support for municipal roads and infrastructure. Next slide, please. So other challenges that municipalities are facing is issues around managing their financial resources. The AG, the Auditor General, did indicate that over 50, almost 70, now the number has increased to over 74% of municipalities. They show signs of fiscal distress. It means they are unable to actually manage their finances properly. So this is a cause of concern. Another issue is what we call consequence management, as many members were already discussing in another unrelated matter. So we find that in municipal environment, that's where most of the issues are happening. Budgets are not spent properly, or they're spent in wrong places. But then when you check what actually consequence management initiatives have been implemented, nothing concrete has been happening. So then it sort of other officials then try to mirror the same thing because they've seen that their colleagues have done some of these things, but then nothing actually happens to them. So that is also another area of concern. Next slide, please. As the PBO, we're just in a process of finalizing a study that we did on Section 139 intervention, wherein we requested a data set from National Treasury, about the most updated municipalities that are under duress, that are under Section 139 and 140 interventions. So we are actually in the process of finalizing that study. We found that there is inconsistent implementation of Section 139, and then we found that there are some municipalities who are on that process for a prolonged period of time. Obviously, the purpose of the intervention is just to go in and to address the issues and then to enable municipalities to be sustainable themselves. So there are some municipalities that are struggling. They are always, almost every year they are always under intervention. So those are some of the areas that a support is needed. Next slide, please. Yeah, on this slide we just provide matters that for municipal oversight consideration. Like we said, there's a need to strengthen 139 interventions by minimizing interference to ensure that Section 139 interventions and 140 are more geared towards the proper service delivery improvement. There's a need to have clear performance metrics when intervention is being initiated. What basically does the 139 aims to achieve and within what time period. There's also a need, like I indicated, for targeted financial supports for municipalities, because that's where they are struggling to manage their budget. If they can't manage their budget, obviously that's why we are seeing so much challenges with regards to municipalities, specifically rural municipalities. So issues around strengthening debt collection to ensure that those who are using the services and those that can afford to pay for the service, they actually pay for it, so that the municipality can have resources to be able to reinvest back into the municipality. Next slide, please. Oh.
Thank you, Mkundi, Chairperson, honorable members. As you would have noted that the Minister of Finance also tabled the Eskom Debt Relief Amendment Bill as part of the 2025 budget. Now, just to provide a bit of context, honorable members would recall that in 2023, that government had introduced the Eskom Debt Relief Bill, and this was to provide Eskom with an amount of 254 billion rand in debt relief. And this was essentially support to help the utility in terms of strengthening its balance sheet, in terms of restructuring its business processes, but also to unlock much needed investment in infrastructure and maintenance. And these were the original allocations that were provided at the time. Just to draw your attention to the current 2025-2026 financial year allocation, where government had planned to provide Eskom with 40 billion in the form of a loan, and alongside that, a direct takeover of 40 billion of Eskom debt. Now, since then, there's been amendments to the debt relief bill. Last year, we saw two significant amendments that were made to the bill. The first amendment was around the introduction of or attaching interest to the loans that government provided to Eskom. And the second amendment was around imposing conditionalities to the loans. And this ultimately provided the Minister of Finance with the power to withhold funds in an event that Eskom could not meet some of these conditions. Now, one of the conditions that were imposed at the time was that Eskom was required to dispose of its finance company. And unfortunately, the utility failed to meet the agreed upon deadline, which prompted the Minister of Finance to reduce the allocation by 4 billion rand. Meaning that from the original 254 billion rand, reduction of 4 billion rand, which meant that the allocation was now 250 billion rand. Now, the current amendment bill tabled before you, honorable members, just proposes changes around the size and the timing of the remaining portion of the debt relief, specifically the 70 billion debt assumption, which will now be reduced to 50 billion, and that will be structured as follows. So government will take over 40 billion rand of that debt in the current financial year, and another 10 billion in the 2028-2029 financial year. And as a result, government will will save approximately 20 billion in the process. And all of this is made possible due to Eskom's improved financial position since these interventions began. So in summary, honorable members, over a 5-year period, government would have provided Eskom with 230 billion in loan support, and this is 24 billion rand less than what was initially projected. And I think as I conclude, it's also worth noting that in line with the original agreement, that debt relief will gradually be converted into government equity on Eskom's balance sheet. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Chair, members, I think we do try to draw the interplay between the fiscal framework and the bills in particular to say it's important then when members analyze or finalize these bills, they ensure that the priorities are really clearly supported within the framework itself. I think what we emphasize here, Chair, we do highlight the importance of seeing the budget really within the context of what is supposed to be done. In the context of priorities set out in the midterm development plan, and really reflect on that in assessing or analyzing the effectiveness of these bills. And as we have emphasized that, we should not only look at the proportional allocation sphere or pivot, but also the potential impact, likely impact on service delivery, inequality, and economic growth. Hence, we start by looking at the situation analysis in particular. We do also see a trend, Nelia showed the trend earlier that shows there is intention of shifting really towards a more provincial local government allocation, which is very important in our view, given that a lot of services are taking place in that area. But we need to go deeper and really try to think about how the situation can really improve, looking at some of the long backlog we've had on service delivery, which, again, in our view, it has direct implications for economic growth and dealing with socio-economic situation. We highlighted a lot of things in our presentation, but we also, in particular, highlight the need, again, the interplay between the fiscal framework and these other two bills to ensure that the support for households in relation to the tax measures like your stealth tax, we didn't talk about stealth tax here, your bracket clip, and others, there is measures to support households in that regard. They show efficiency of use of funds in addressing inefficiencies in government spending. They also deal with the issues around municipalities and how the proposed allocations are enabled to allow municipalities to address some of the issues. But I think the issue of accountability comes also quite clearly stuck in our face to say it's not enough to talk about allocation without talking about accountability within the local government sector. There's a need for oversight on the SOEs, hence as they play a very important role within the service delivery, but also supporting economic growth. I think, Chair, what we really emphasize is that the committee should carefully consider the issues we raise in these bills to ensure that promote equitable service delivery, address inequality, and support development across all spheres. And more importantly, there's a proper alignment between the budgets and some of the strategic development plans that we've had over time. We do thank you for the opportunity, Chair, and we welcome further input from the committee. I forgot to comment on something before I started in the presentation. I thought, when should I comment or not? The issue of the errors mistake, we do emphasize the importance of looking at the Section 14 of the Money Bills Act, rather, because it's often less complicated when such amendment changes comes from government. However, this committee would still have to satisfy itself whether the Money Bills Act is complied with. So we would also like to look at that when that is circulated later. Thank you so much, Chair and members. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Team PBO. I'm going to give a chance to members to engage with the presentations. I'm not going to allocate time to each member, but kindly be mindful of the time when you make your submissions. Can I see the hands that would like to engage on the presentation? Let me start with Honorable Swartz, then Honorable Bretz, Honorable Siwisa, Honorable Ngumalo, Honorable Majola, and we'll end with Honorable Ndlovu.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just a few remarks and questions and clarities. But firstly, thank you very much for the presentations. It was very, very insightful. Every day I learn more. Chairperson, on the first one, just inputs in the Division of Revenue Bill. I'm the Western Cape representative. Despite of growing in migration and urbanization pressure, the Western Cape remains underfunded relative to its service burden. And the question, Chairperson, what adjustments to the equitable share formula are being considered to better reflect urbanization and population growth, especially in provinces like the Western Cape, that deliver services to many migrants to the province. The second question is just my input is the real per capita funding for provincial functions like health and education is eroding despite escalating costs. How will National Treasury ensure that provinces are not forced to reduce frontline staff or basic services due to below inflation increases in real capita funding? And the third one on the division is also a concern from my side, the decline in infrastructure investment. Infrastructure backlogs are growing while gross capital formation in infrastructure has declined drastically since 2015 on slide 41. Why is there no clear national infrastructure recovery plan? And how will Treasury address inefficiencies in provincial infrastructure delivery, especially given merged conditional grants? On the appropriations, spending focused on transfers, over 66% of the total national appropriations are transfers, subsidies in slide 29, while capital expenditure is less than 1%. Is Treasury satisfied with this allocation pattern? And how will this help fix our schools, our clinics, and other critical infrastructure? The concern is, shouldn't capital expenditure be significantly increased? Also a job driver. Social grants, I'm also worried. The child support grant remains below the food poverty line, slide 40. And the SRD grant has lost real value, just an input. Public employment programs, too small to dent real unemployment in our country. The unemployment rate is 32.6%, youth unemployment 45.6%, yet allocations to unemployment programs remain limited as per slide 13. How does Treasury justify small increases to public employment funding while describing youth unemployment as a ticking bomb? And that is a real ticking bomb. Chairperson, I've got 2 or 3, but I'm going to also give my colleagues also a bit on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Swartz. Honorable Brett.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Thank you, PBO. You've been very brief and you spoke very fast, so I'm going to try my level best to do the same. So bear with me. I know there are time constraints. Page 9, slide 9. You mentioned that the measures alone may not be sufficiently protect vulnerable households from the broader inflationary effects of a VAT increase. Now, bearing in mind the amount of the grant, 370 grant, people use that to buy stuff. So they are going to pay more in VAT than what the increase to the grant is. Have you calculated what the effect on the poorest of the poor, depending on the SDR grant, will be with the 0.5% increase in VAT? Coming to page 19, slide 19, you mentioned, and it's not only PBO, everybody mentioned the ratio of residents per doctor. But I'm concerned about the next level, and that is residents ratio to a specialist. Are those stats available? If you take a huge city like in Gauteng, Tembisa, the Tembisa hospital has, for example, 3 neurosurgeons. Compared to Tembisa's total population, which I think is around about 1 million people, 1 million to 3, it doesn't add up. Coming to, and I do understand that the health department is also in the process of scaling down the specialists in Gauteng. For example, I'm only talking about Tembisa Hospital, not all the rest included. Slide number 24. There you talk about the division of revenue between the 3 spheres of government, nominal growth over the 2025 MTEF, and then we talk about 3.1%, 4.5%, 4.4%, bearing in mind that the national economic growth is only the real term 0.6%, and the inflated expectation in the budget 1.9%. But that's a huge area of concern for me. Nominal growth is much faster than economic growth, and that's why we are getting into serious trouble. Coming to slide number 26, one thing that I want to highlight, all 3 of government has the same pool of taxpayers and payers, service pay, or people that pay for services, instances, companies that pay for services. Have you ever calculated what is the total amount of tax that a South African pays in respect of all 3 spheres, rates, taxes, directly or indirectly? So I think it's maybe time that we speak about it. How much does each and every South African pay out of every rand towards a sphere of government? Coming to page 30. Okay, the conditional grants. One thing, maybe you can help me. These conditional grants that you've set out, are those grants allocated strictly according to equitable share formula on page 30 specifically? The next page, 31, we have the same problem again. Average annual 2024 MTF growth 3.9%, compare that with the real economic growth, and that's where we are in trouble. The economy doesn't grow fast enough. Okay, on page 32, maybe you can help me. These amounts that are spent on education, health, social development and other, are those amounts allocated or amounts actually spent? Because we know all 9 provinces they don't spend all their budgets. So my question is that actually spent or budgeted? Coming to, yes, I have to mention that slide 36, contingency reserve declining, that is highly concerning. Anything can happen and then we are in trouble again, like in 2020 with the floods in various provinces. On slide 39, the Minister of Education is quoted, and there's a quotation, I'm not going to repeat it, but my question is, how? Maybe I'm just going to leave it there. How? Page 40, that I've referred to it already, 30 Rand doesn't adequately address the shortfall as well as the VAT impacts. Your alternative proposal, maybe, if you have one. Then on page 43, municipal matters raised in the SONA. The proposed government intervention, how does the SONA translate into the DORA? Can you maybe give us an indication there? And I think I'm nearly finished. My last question. Yes, on page 46. One of the problems is you make provision, or you refer to bulk purchases for electricity and inventory consumed. Many local authorities does not properly bill for services. When they bill and they receive some revenue for especially water and electricity, they don't pay their service provider, the water boards and Eskom. And that has a trickle effect, a domino effect, where Eskom is owed billions by local municipalities and water boards are in real trouble now. How can we address that? Your proposals on that one. And that, Madam Chair, as many chairs said, with those few words, I'm concluded.
That was indeed very fast, Honorable Brett. Honorable Siwisa.
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Doc, for the presentation from the PBO. As Chair, we are learning every day, and I'm trying to, because I wanted to check. There's something I wanted to check with the office of the PBO. Sometime last week we had, I don't know if you watch all these programs in Parliament, we had a question and answer session in the NCOP, the Minister of Science and Technology, and in between one of the responses mentioned that any student that wants to come to South Africa, they are welcome to come here. We'll happily accommodate them with reference to what's happening in the USA and everything. Now, we have a problem of infrastructure to accommodate our students. It's crazy out there. I was looking at the graphs. It's a crazy situation that our kids cannot find space in higher education institutions across South Africa. You run from one province to the next, you still have the same problem. And now we have a minister that is welcoming students from outside, which means with the little that we have, now we have to also share with students internationally. So on that note, to what extent does the budget align education and training programs with the skills required in high demand industries such as technology and green energy? Because I'm specifically making reference to the Minister of Science and Technology because those are his departments. How is it going to also the budget propose to improve the access to quality education for schools, for students from low-income families And then I want to come to the issue of Eskom and the decision by the minister to reduce allocation and all the systems that have been put in place. And at this moment, as we are sitting here, there is a Karusan main transmissions substation that has recently been active in the Northern Cape. And we are speaking about IPPs. And how is this thing going to affect at a later stage? Because remember, Eskom is a state entity. It's our baby. But the more we get transmission substations, renewable energy, it means at some point Eskom is going to lose its relevance. The more we come up with all of these IPPs, because this is a privately owned transmission substation in the Northern Cape. And if we are not careful, so how would you advise that what measures can be put in place and advise the minister to say, we need to put in more effort actually to assist Eskom. This is our baby. Eskom has been carrying us for so long, we can't just let it go. We have a problem about township economy, and the money is not enough to revive township economy. It seems as if not much is done. When the Minister of Small Businesses and speaks about supporting small businesses, you ask yourself which ones? Because there are people honestly that are trying to revive their communities. But for some reason, they just don't get the opportunity or the assistance. So does the budget adequately ensure that previously marginalized businesses, including those owned by persons with disabilities, youth, and women, have access to funding resources and economic opportunities? And according to you, the PBO, does it ensure that the 2025 budget strikes a balance between land redistribution and economic productivity? It's very alarming to be sitting here when we had a robust debate, I think a week ago, pertaining the fiscal framework and particularly coming to the issue of the VAT. And what you are narrating to us now pertaining the increase of the VAT, it surely says that we are on the right track. That was not a smart move. I can't even argue about it because all the figures that have been presented here clearly shows that it was not a smart move to increase the VAT. And this is one of the issues I've always been arguing PBO to say 0.5% is too much. It's a lot. We look at the figures where you say the food basket and the minimum wage that is there. The food is too expensive. The salary that you take home is too little. You can't. The two, they can't meet. 1.5 increase actually means 1.3 in grants. So that's why I'm saying, Chair, we are learning every time when we come here and try to see clearly at the end of the day. Those will be my only questions for now, Chair. The issue of law enforcement. I don't, the law enforcement, more needs to be done when it comes to policing. We've got a lot of young boys and girls that are sitting at home. They're not being employed. So with an independent analysis, your independent analysis, does the budget adequately allocate resources to SAPS to improve policing and crime prevention? We have an issue of not enough shelters. for GBVF victims. And as much as there's not enough, we don't even have enough shelters for teenage mothers that are being abused by their parents because of. So is the budget actually addressing those issues of in the society? Because crime is going up, GBV victims, every day you wake up, there's one story or the other about things that are happening out there, especially when it comes to gender-based violence. Our young girls are being forced into marriages. They've got nowhere to run. Does the budget actually speak when that falls under social development? Does it address all of those issues in the country? Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Siwisa. Honorable Ngumalo.
Thank you very much, Chair, and my greetings to you, honorable members, PBO, and all the support staff. Chairperson, on the summary of the PBO, they said that the 2025 Division of Revenue Bill reflect an intention to shift a greater proportion of resources to provincial and local government, which is a commendable statement, Chair, because most of our people are in the locals, not here. So if ever the most high chunk is going to go down there, it will assist our communities to make sure that their lives are better. Chairperson, on the question that I'm having to the PBO, which reflect on the issue of municipality revenue collection and financial sustainability, what additional step can be taken to enhance municipal financial sustainability, improving the billing system and ensure equitable service fee structures? Because most of the municipalities are having challenge in terms of the billing. It's a bit of a mix-up. They can't be able to do things on their own. The other question I'm having, it reflect on the issue of energy security. 2025 budget. Given the persistent energy crisis that we are faced with every day, how does the 2025 budget ensure energy security, and what additional measures can the PEBO propose to promote a stable and reliable electricity? Because most of our people are small business, and the electricity is one of those tool of trade that they can be using to make sure that they grow their business. So, but in terms of the instability in the electricity sector, it makes them to be difficult. Chairperson, the one issue which I want to raise is the issue of gender-based violence, or in terms of support for victims of crime. You know, gender-based violence has become a pandemic in South Africa. What additional measures can the PBO propose to address gender-based violence and support survivors, particularly those access to legal services and protection orders? Because we know what is happening down there in terms of our people who are being victimized day in and day out. According to the PBO's, another question, Chair, how does the budget enhance support to services for victims of crime, which is including shelter, counseling, and victim assistance programs? In one area, there was a fight between the couple, a mother and the father. So the father was chasing everyone. So he became the boss. Meanwhile, you as the victim, you are out there. So there must be a way of making sure that those people are sheltered, given counseling and a victim assistance program to make sure that their life is continuing. I think these are some of the questions that I'm having. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Ngumalo. Honorable Majorna.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And also thanks to the PBO for the valid information. Madam Chair, I've got few observations and also followed by some questions. The previous speaker, Madam Chair, started by zooming in from the summary, paragraph 1, I will start on paragraph 2, where it says that budget align with the 7th administration priorities as per the MTDP. My first question, a quick one. I'm aware that this plan was approved by the cabinet with its implementation plan, which is a National Communication Strategic Framework. When you were doing this exercise, did you make the reference to that document? And then further question, where is it, the MTDP plan? Is it at a cabinet stage? Does it require to cascade it down to us? That's my first question. My observation, Madam Chair, my observation 1, which is the third one, is the issue of the food basket increase, the affordability around 5,152, which takes me to the second question, where the Competition Commission 2024, I will quote, Madam Chair, it says, essential food price monitoring report indicated that retail prices of essential food remain very high despite low producer cost and fuel prices. And then it further says, this suggests that retailers undermines productive measures by not passing savings to consumers. I want to check what intervention that is required, because you can't save when it comes to manufacturing period. Then when it comes to pricing, then you don't take into consideration to shift it to the consumers in terms of pricing. The next observation, it's with regards to the salary spending, 68% on just few items, food, water, electricity and housing. That's the serious concern. Well, it means that you've got only 38% to play around. School, it's not here. Transport, it's not here. Medical services, it's not here. Then it tells you that if you populate these other, which I regard as essential too, therefore you've got nothing to save. That's a serious concern. The other observation, it's with regards to the grants dependent. I want to check with the PBO to have an ascending graph on this grant dependent. What does it tell us? Do we making any meaningful inroad in terms of reducing the grant dependent community? Because every year, which I don't think it requires us to applaud the increase to 28 million, the grant dependent. Noting the comment from PBO again with regards to VAT and the justifications contained on the Treasury submission when they were justifying the VAT increase, where the benchmarking was made. I note the PPO's comment to say, yet the unemployment in these countries ranges from 3 to 13.4% in 2024. Well, it's noted that comment. Again, without repeating what the previous speaker indicated, but it is very important one to say, if you look at that table that speak to the universities, the South African universities around the applicant and the spaces available, that's really indicate that we don't place the higher education as a priority in this country. We can't not plan around what the school level it's producing, which are the potential tertiary level. Then you've got this figure. This is because we were aware how many students that were at grade 12 in 2024, but look at that figure. That tells us that the higher education is a challenge in this country. And then, well, let's go to the next slide, in the national appropriations. Well, we note that it has increased by more than inflation, but looking at the content of the table itself, from the preamble, we were given the economic outlook, which tells us about the alarming unemployment rate, which is telling us about the snail growth of our economy, struggling even to reach 2%. Well, you look at the reasoning or a strategy around appropriating these funds, sitting here without any guiding factor, because the first thing came to my mind when I looked at the economic growth and in unemployment. I've looked at these appropriations, and then my first priority was to look at the economic orientated votes. Agriculture being part of it, negative 3.3. Communication and digital technology, that's an option to address that university crisis, because students should have been considered in terms of enrolling in line or digitally, but it's been reduced by 35%. Maybe if PBO can just tell us here as to, yes, we understand the COVID issues, yes, we understand the economic crisis, but, well, in terms of this adjustment, what influence it? Because to me, it sounds as if it's a thumbs up situation. Going back to the provincial equitable shares, well, there was a complaint from the Western Cape to say why Gauteng received the bigger slice, 21%. I won't complain about KZN, 20.3%, I'm fine. But what informs these ratings, the allocations? I can see here, it says it's determined by equitable formula. What does it take into consideration? As population, the recent data, and there are two questions there: how reliable it is, how recent it is, because these things keeps on changing drastically every year. And then to check as to what will be the PPO's suggestions with regards to the spending patterns when it comes to the provinces and municipalities. Quick one, Madam Chair, the next one, it's with regards to matters raised at the SONA 2025. There is a suggestion there. I want to get the opinion of the PPO. It proposes that we should go to a ring fencing approach in terms of water and electricity funds. Well, I've looked at almost the 3 municipalities. I looked at Durban, I look at Msunduzi, where I come from. I've noticed on their revenue side that this is the main source of almost every municipality compared to the rest. Then ring fencing this, yes, I understand the alarming debt book with regards to Eskom and water authorities, but I want to check in terms of the proper functioning of municipalities, taking the only source and then you ring fence it for water and electricity. What are we saying with other essential functions? If we are going to ring fence, I believe it says we will ring fence to spend it on any water and electricity related expenditure, if I read this correctly. And then I won't say much, Madam Chair, on Eskom amendment bill. If it's got a saving, it's fine. If it's got conditions attached to a convicted grant to loan, that is fine. It will address the behavior of Eskom. The last one, Madam Chair, I haven't seen on an appropriation table. Where is the defense vote hiding here? Presidency, Parliament? How is it? What is it during 2025? Noting that we are bringing back our soldiers from DRC, I believe there will be a drop from that vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Majola. And you made my day by noting the views of both the National Treasury and the PBO around the issues of it. We are going towards a right direction. Honorable Ndlovu.
Chair, I think that's why he's seated next to me. Keep on engaging. No, thanks, Honorable Chair. Again, greetings to everyone. Earlier when I speak, I forgot my comrade marked, and greetings to yourself. Chair, I think let me also join my colleagues and on the issues relating to the appropriations. Chair, I think one will have to check the role of the PBO, making the analysis. So when my members keep on asking questions, then I'm like, will the PBO going to respond on behalf of National Treasury? Will the PBO going to respond on behalf of the AG? Or is the analysis? So they are doing the analysis. So, but be that as it may, Chair, in terms of the analysis, the PBO is saying on page 25, what I want to request on the division of revenue, because you are making analysis, when you are saying 5.9% to the province, that's how it is on the division of revenue, 2.4% and local government, 58.7% to another institutions. So one will ask a question, what are those institutions? So let's try to unpack, because at the end of the day, this becomes a public document. And nobody will know that what are the institutions that we're talking about. So if maybe we can have a smaller slide whereby we are able to highlight on the other institutions, because it's a chunk of money. If you look at it, like percentage, if I may say, 58.7%. One will say,
It's more than half.
yes. One will say, they're giving provinces 5.9 and 2.4, but they cannot disclose the 58.7%. So let's try to look at that part. Chair, another one, I'm talking, we are in the National Council of Provinces, it's a select committee, right? I'm coming from Limpopo. Why we give Gauteng so much, and Limpopo is a rural province. And at the end of the day, we are talking about people migrating from rural to the urban. And now also we are talking about the issue of accommodation. Can't we say, let's reverse and say we allocate money to the rural provinces so that everybody, or we grow the economy, or we make sure that, yesterday we were talking about the Northwest, whereby currently as we speak, they don't even have an airport, or I don't know if I can say airport or what, yeah. Yes, they don't have, everything's now down, is dead. So now you are continuing not giving them money, and you are saying you give them, Northwest, what is it? You're my way, 7.0%. So, and they cannot, even the rural province, there's no other way of also regenerating money, because remember, it's a rural province, and people, they don't pay the services in most cases. So that view or analysis, I think is correct, but let's see how best can we advise the National Treasury in terms of the equitable shares. So mine, I know my premier, we're gonna make sure that we're gonna increase this one, but it's not enough, these equitable shares. Chair, you go to the slide 43, municipal matters raised in 2025 zone, weak local government structures. The same thing applies today. To say, if you look at the discussion, it also shows that most of the municipalities that are not functioning well, I think they're also coming from the rural provinces. Because one of the things is that it's like they don't get support. And not getting support is one of the things, in most cases, they will say, oh, National Treasury will come, to say, Tabazimbi, they don't spend, I'm taking money to send it to Joburg. You see? Then they will say, oh, they take the money from auditor comes to say, you didn't spend the money, now the audit outcomes will talk something else to say, this municipality is not functioning well. So what are the interventions that need to be brought forward? This also talks to page 49. Page 49 on bullet 4, municipalities struggle with critical skills shortage in technical and management positions alongside political interference. Alongside political interference, that undermines administrative effect. Case 22. I can say, when now we're talking about the interference, politicians will say, when we try to intervene, because when the auditors comes, they will point at me as a political head. They will not go to the administrations. Then what will happen? I said, but I was trying to intervene, but they call it interference. So I think it's one of the things, let's try to accommodate both of interventions and interference, because whatever that is happening, like now, as I'm referring to our discussions yesterday, because fortunately the Committee of Finance and Appropriation is one membership. The same people were talking one thing to say there is lack of leadership in one area, or it be it municipality or the province. But now when the leadership will come to say, But when you said we intervene, you are saying we are interfering, you see. Chair, lastly, it's it is one thing, I think that chairperson, you have spoken about, at least we want to hear on that issue of the Northern Cape and Northwest. Is it Northwest, the transfer of money from one province to the other? Chair, that's why my question was to say, but if I ask the PBO this question, will you help me? 2025 Eskom debt relief. How does, according to the PBO independent analysis, how does the amendment to the Eskom debt relief aim to enhance Eskom's financial sustainability and reduce the long-term burden on the state? You see, I'm asking that. So, Chair, in other areas, hey, this is frustrating. You will see to say, no, there is no longer the low shady. No? There's no longer low shady. Why? Then we celebrate. When I'm here, I got an SMS. Honorable Gov, there is a load shedding here from 7 o'clock, from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock. Ne? They said, no, it's not load shedding, it's load reduction. But the fact remains is the same time, the same thing happened. You see, so it's one of the things that will ask you to say how best can you assist, especially in trying to advise, yes, in trying to advise in relation to this issue of Eskom in terms of the load shedding, load reduction, whatever, and considering that there's a serious issue of infrastructure, aging infrastructure. There is a serious aging infrastructure at all angles. That's why some people will come and say, 30 years we have not done anything, forgetting that since we've been here before even 30 years, then we are still living in with those pipes. We have not done anything. So when we try to do something, the government that's led by the ANC, when we try to do something, they said we haven't done anything, forgetting that it's aging infrastructure that they still is still now operating in our country. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Honorable Ndlovu. Mine is just a short one, that comes after the follow-up, as a follow-up to the submission made by Honorable Siwisa. To say, maybe according to your good selves, PBO, what do you think can be done to accelerate the transition of renewable energy? And how does the budget guard against the worsening economic conditions or insecurity for business and the households? That would just be my follow-up. And Honorable Ndlovu likes this thing of saying that we do, every time she comes at me, she'll remind me that there's no airport in Northwest. There is an airport, it's not operating.
Thank you so much, Chair and members, for really good questions. And thank you for Honorable Ndlovu for protecting us there, that some of the questions we can't answer them, definitely will be answered by government. But I think the a lot of related questions, I'll try to talk to the questions that I would say are a bit maybe controversial, but anyway, I think everything is controversial here. Which I'll lump them together. The one question that comes a lot is really an issue of the effectiveness of different spheres in that regard, but also placing a lot of burden on the local government. Chair, one of the points which keeps coming back to, I think it links to some of a lot of members' point that they've raised somehow. We'll try to answer them in that way, holistically. The issue of governance structure, I think NCOP is a very important house dealing with the governance of the whole country. So for me, this is very central, these discussions around what kind of governance system we have in our society and economy, in our country. We have 3 spheres. We've got so much provinces, we've got so much municipalities, but also we've got a 4th layer, I'm stealing Nelia's thunder there, of transfers going to other entities and so on. And even within the spheres themselves, there's other layers of governance systems and all of that. And clearly, this is not working. It's working to a certain extent, but not entirely, because had that been very effective, we would not have so much issues around service delivery in particular. So, one of the points raised in the previous term is, we need to have a very short-term, medium-term, and long-term thinking around, do we need to restructure that in a way to make it more effective? Because some of the layers of inefficiencies lies between that. Even, let's take local government. You've metros, we've got districts, we've got so much layers there that in itself, it creates inefficiencies. And I said this conversation because there has to be the discussion of you by this House, NCOP, whether you need to really reduce inefficiencies by merging some of these structures, maybe having lesser municipalities or lesser provinces to ensure inefficiency. But also the issue of skills comes in there, because you're able to spread your skills sets that you have when you bring in more of reducing a lot of layers of inefficiencies. And I say this controversially because it is an important determination if we are going to try to shift, improve service delivery. When we look at the Section 139 issues, a lot of it, you're correct, Chair, a lot of them comes from the rural areas. Many municipalities are struggling there. And the question is then, do you need to merge those with those are better off to ensure that you can spread the skills and capacity? So my view, Chair, we have to have that conversation as an NCOP. How is the current governance structures really enabling the service delivery? Do you need to have a lot of layers of oversight as we currently have, which are not effective in the latter scale of things as we see the service delivery? So what I'm saying is that there's probably a budget issue, but there's also a lot of structure itself to say, is the governance structure allowing efficiency in service delivery? We have more layers, and I would argue that. But also when you look at international literature as well, there's few countries that so much have layers of governance than we have in South African context. And I feel NCOP has a very good role to play in trying to say, can we review the structure to ensure that we can improve on service delivery and maybe provide such analysis that it can be improved or not. And I think that's, for me, the important role that NCOP can play, and maybe a long-term plan around improving service delivery or dealing with some of the issues that we have on socio-economic issues. This leads me to another point. Again, I was attending a three spheres planning meeting at the NCOP, I think last year. It was quite striking that I saw many of the premiers, MECs, and many of these presenters saying how much they're spending on these areas, going to spend more on infrastructure. And I think that's not helpful. And I feel, I was saying to Siraj now, we need to start having a point as an NCOP to say, well, when the premier comes here to say to us, to present, they must tell us how that spending will improve on specific outcome. Because that, for them to come and tell us at NCOP that they're spending so much on this and all, it's not helpful. It is not. So we need to start asking them, the Ministry of Finance, when you come here, rather tell us how that spending will improve on employment in your province, or that spending will improve on infrastructure. And then we take that as a monitoring to say, okay, you told us that we gave you 2 billion as a province, we're going to use for infrastructure. Next time, you must update us how much infrastructure has been updated. I think in that way, we are able to make more quicker progress, rather than them coming year in, year out to say to us, no, we're spending much on this, spending much on this. Because it's very difficult to respond to the question of outcomes without them committing themselves. Because we've raised concerns around outcomes, on education, health, and so many of them. But they need to commit themselves, even the ministers at the national level, to say, look, how this spending being allocated to us will allow us to improve on these outcomes. So I think that's the next point, which, in our view, it's difficult to respond now. Hence, we are arguing that the alignment is very key, because we are forcing government to actually ensure there's proper alignment between the budget and outcome. And I think we just did a short paper now, which we can share later on, which shows prioritizing specific departments based on the medium-term strategic plan, to say these are the critical areas where we expect them to contribute quite significantly in us realizing those outcomes. And when they come here, those departments, we're able to say, in terms of the MTDP, you have this function. How is this budget going to help you to realize this? It's because it's a first budget, and we're able to do that oversight over time as an NCOP. So I think that's another important determination, that they need to tell us how what they're doing will improve on the outcomes, rather than telling us how much they're going to spend. And I feel that will increase a lot. Which brings me to a quick point around the MTBP. I think the MTBP has been published, as I understand, and it has been published. 2025, 2024, 2029, MTBP is available. I think we will, on the website, we can also share with the committees. It is there. So it's available. And I hence also bring again to the point about SONA and DORA. How does SONA and DORA come into place? I think it's just an approach where we're saying, budget on its own, it's not helping us. So we need to see it from the lens of the priorities that we want to achieve. And SONA set out the priorities in line with the medium-term development plan. So our question to say, we need to ensure that the DORA allocation itself and the appropriations is really properly aligned to such priorities. And hence we flag it here to say, these are the priorities set out in the State of the Nation address, and are we seeing the proper alignment with that? So that when we come next year, we are able to ask, or the president, at least when he gives SONA next year, he's able to update houses, what progress has been done in regards to that. I think that's what we're trying to do a lot of time, to ensure that we clearly outline the priorities and whether there's alignment between the budget and those priorities. The issue of VAT is obviously in houses now, so we have done some work. So what we have said, we've done a paper, obviously, which we circulate later on. We looked at different things. I think the point we're trying to make here, Chair, is to say, we need to ensure that we get quality information as the Parliament in terms of, for oversight purposes, to say, this information relevant and quality information. So what we're trying to do is provide additional information that will enable us as a house to provide oversight over the tax measures proposed by government. In our paper, what we have shown in our paper, we said there's three different ways of looking at VAT. Obviously, the paper is based on the previous initial budget that never presented, to say you could have can VAT have a positive net effect, whereby you raise this income, and this income gets allocated more in a more strategically areas that ensure economic growth, ensure employment is created. It ensures that vulnerable societies are protected, and so on. So we did look at that, say, can it be have a net effect, which again, it requires a very proper analysis in oversight in us, in our case, in the oversight process. The second aspect was to say, let's look at who pays more VAT or taxes generally in the current system. And we did extrapolate that quite specifically and showed that certain percentage of households, I think we said 30% of that comes from the lower income households. And the other 2 percentile pays 50% of the VAT. And I think we're quite in agreement with our treasury colleagues. Then our debate was said, then if you want to deal with, because tax at the same time, Chair, it has a social objective as well. Hence we debate a lot to say, you also want to think about inequalities and some other effects. So what we did was say, okay, are there other mechanisms that government can consider if indeed we have clear sense of showing that VAT would likely to impact a lot low households, but also the measures that were introduced in place. So those things playing to space, we argue that there has to be clear sense of, hence I mentioned the interplay with the fiscal framework and these other two bills, to say if Parliament, Houses or the committee debate this fiscal framework, then let's make sure that the Division of Revenue and Appropriations Bill deliver on that mechanism of supporting or reducing the pressure within the site, whichever tax measures is put in place. So I want to emphasize that point to say it's very important to dissect that in that regard without laboring a lot on this point. And I think we'll be going further to also look into that as well, but also listen to other submissions in that regard of other alternative measures you put in place. I think I'll want to leave it there. The one point I wanted to touch as well before I give to Dr. Landi, I'll come in later. Let me leave Dr. Landi and other colleagues come in. Nelia, come in. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm so glad the member picked up on the transfers, because we've been doing quite a bit of work on the transfers to public entities. Some of the departments need to transfer to certain entities and to provinces in terms of the conditional grants, and they transfer to some of the big SOEs as well. But then we have more than 100 public entities that the national departments transfer funds to. One of the departments are trade and industry. They've got, I think, the most, 17 entities which they transfer funds to. And we did a calculation in terms of the size of those public entities. It's almost the same size as the national sphere of government in terms of what they spend on compensation of employees and also the number of staff that they employ. Yes, so in previous presentations and analysis we do have, and we can share it. I think it might be in the 6th Parliament that we did a lot of work on that, really calculating and putting a database together of all these entities. Luazi did it for us, and she did a very good job. And then we identified the biggest ones, and we did a short brief on it, but we can share it with members. But sometimes there's a lot of duplication between the work that these entities do. Just one example that I can think of now is we've got a Department of Small Business. They transfer to other entities to implement programs. But the IDT, for example, also has, I think, an institution that they transfer. They do the exact same thing than funding small businesses, which one of our members also now indicated. So a lot of duplication, a lot of funds lying everywhere, with a lot of administration costs linked to it. We even have one entity, I think they only have 6 staff members, but the CEO of that entity earns 6 million a year. So that kind of things we looked at, and we did a lot of comparisons as well in terms of the COE. Then we have a huger entity, and the COE actually only earns 1.3 million a year. So there's no there's no guidelines in terms of how they should structure the institutions. In terms of the equitable share, members, one of the additional slides in the presentation, we didn't go through it because of time. We actually explained what is in the Division of Revenue Bill, and in terms of the data that the Treasury used to update the equitable share formula. And then one of the members, we are actually concerned about the police services. What we picked up this year, their COE funds has been reduced of the MTEF, and we couldn't actually, we didn't agree with that, but anyway, so we looked at their personnel structure as well. They said they're going to restructure the whole police service. But if you look at the personnel structure, there's no changes in the personnel structure. All the numbers on level 6, for example, exactly the same numbers. On level 10, exactly the same numbers. You can't see that they've actually made changes to their personnel structure. This morning on the radio again, the chairperson of the police committee indicated that there are so many brigadiers and almost all of them are, and that was the issue at one stage, and that was the recommendation that they should look at their administrative structure. But as I say, you can't say even over the medium term that there's no changes to the personnel numbers. Explain about them. Yeah, I think I might. The conditional grant formula they use on a provincial level, they use the same formula as what they use on for the equitable share. Sometimes there are a bit of additional funding, but we also have a table in the Division of Revenue Bill that's not in the equitable share, where they look at especially for the social workers, there were additional funding given to certain provinces, which are not included in the equitable share formula. The equitable share, the growth in provinces, what we mentioned in that one table is in the previous medium-term expenditure framework, the growth was only 3.9, but at least in the new 2025 medium-term, the growth for equitable shares to provinces increased to 4.8%. Yes, I think, Busi?
Thank you, Nelia. I think in terms of the question, our director has already spoken about our calculations on VAT, but to also say in our fiscal framework presentation, we also highlighted the work by the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, because what it showed was some of the goods that are not going to be zero rated. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that even though there's discussions about extending the zero rating, that it doesn't necessarily mean that all poor households necessarily overly consume the goods that are on that list. But also to the honourable member's question about retailers overcharging, so to speak. I think, of course, those are the work of the Competition Commission and others who need to do this work about what the pricing is, but it also highlights why zero rating is a blunt tool, because retailers can choose not to extend the zero rating benefit to consumers, and that's one of our concerns. But also just to also highlight that the zero rated goods don't also include a lot of things that people need on a daily basis, right? So if we talk about toiletries, a lot of it focuses on food, but all households utilize things beyond this. So the concern is that retailers won't pass on the benefits. In terms of the question about nominal growth faster than GDP growth, I think we need to, compare similar things, right? So we're comparing real GDP growth versus nominal growth. Real GDP growth is GDP deflated, whereas the nominal numbers, obviously the nominal numbers, and in our analysis we use CPI. So I guess to say to the member that the issue is not necessarily that nominal growth is faster than real GDP growth, which are different quantums or ways of understanding, but we show, and why it's important that we show real per capita growth to show that there are declines in that as well, so that it doesn't look like numbers are increasing continuously. And in terms of total amount of tax, that is a bit more complex, if we obviously have the tax numbers at a national level. Last year, Treasury provided the revenue collected at a municipal level, but I think the member is really asking about, in a way, a complex tax incidence report about who pays how much tax, which would be difficult to answer, but to basically say that we know, for example, that VAT is is significant. Our top 3 tax tools are PIT, CIT, and VAT, and of course VAT is paid by everyone in society. So the concept of taxpayers is that everyone in the country is a taxpayer. It's just that their tax incidence is different. Few levies are paid by different people, and so forth. So we all are taxpayers. It's just that not all of us are personal income taxpayers. There's a question the member asked about how in education, and I think that's a very important question, because I think this is a question that the Appropriations Committee needs to be asking. How will these educational outcomes be met? There's research by Spall from Stellenbosch and his colleagues, and they showed that based on basic education price index that between 2008 and 2009 and 2018, real per capita learning or real per capita learner expenditure declined by 2.3%, which is why we keep emphasizing this backlog. So over a decade, per learner spending declined by on average 2.3%. So, and the highest, by the way, since this I think is important for particularly the select committee, that the highest declines were seen in the Free State. So in real per capita terms, real learner spending declined by 13% in this period. In Limpopo, it was also 13% decline, and in the Northwest, it was 11% decline. So in those three provinces, real per learner spending declined significantly over that period. And so we also have the same question, with the current budget, how can those backlogs be addressed? In terms of alternative proposals for the child support grant, won't go into too much into this, but the Department of Social Development did launch a review of child poverty and the child support grant report, where they did propose alternatives for how to address, how to address children's needs in South Africa. And I'll group the last questions about GBV to say that, this is why it's important, as well as the land question, as well as all the questions about marginalized groups or disadvantaged groups. It's a question about, is our budget responsive to the Constitution? Is our budget responsive to gendered needs? Is our budget, if we're to test it against these things, are we considering it holistically in that way? We've just published a paper on gender responsive budgeting. And one of the things or examples I'll give to members is that government provides houses through RDPs, right? However, when women are leaving their abusive households, they're given temporary housing, which leaves them vulnerable to going back to the house that they were abused in. So things like that, consolidating different government existing programs to say, for example, we will prioritize people who are being abused so that they don't go back to the households where they're being abused. We'll provide them with an RDP faster, are some of the considerations when we think about gender responsive budgeting. So our budget is not necessarily gender responsive budgeting, responsive, which is why GBV therefore is a question that continuously comes up about questions. And I think to caution members that, gender responsive budgeting should not be reduced to budgets for women. It is about everybody in society and how different groups are impacted. But we've shared the paper, and I hope the secretaries will share it with you all. And I think I'll end there and pass it on to my next colleague.
Thank you. Kagiso?
Thank you, Dr. Yankees, and thank you to honorable members. I think my colleagues have covered also some of the things that I was going to cover, but I'll try to add on a little bit more context there. There was a question around the doctor-to-patient ratio, specifically for medical specialists. We did publish a pre-brief last year with around the numbers there, and the data that we had at the time was taken from the Department of Health, from their Human Resource Health Strategy, and it covered the workforce in 2019, and the numbers there were that there were 10 medical specialists for every 100,000 population. And so to translate that, it means one medical specialist would be serving 10,000 people. And as I mentioned, that this was a 2019 figure, although the report was released in 2023, so the number might be even significantly worse. And my colleague did cover the question on retailers not adequately passing cost savings to consumers, what interventions can be placed there. I think, honorable members, the important thing to keep in mind is that the argument that we're making is that consumers aren't immune to when input costs increase. However, when conditions change, there seems to be an inertia with regards to price changes. So there's a behavior there around retailers that needs to be integrated a little bit further. And so our concern is that if that's the case right now, then what would be the case post the introduction of the VAT increase and the commitments made by the National Treasury to protect consumers? Would there be even any other change? So like my colleague touched on, I think we'd have to look at how the Competition Commission and the Competition Tribunal previously dealt with potential retail profiteering to be able to adequately advise members on the remedies that could be considered on that regard. And yeah, my colleague again also touched around, on the question that was asked around gender-based violence and how the budget can support victims of that. As also Dr. Alandi touched on, the concern that we have is that when it comes to the police personnel, the number on the figure for the MTF period is not increasing despite the increase in the budget over there. And so it would be very important to increase personnel so that they can be able to respond better with regards to GBV issues, and also can be better equipped to respond to GBV cases. Yeah, I think I'll pass on to my colleagues.
Mkundi.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm just going to touch on a few questions, including the questions around inward and urban migration, and then with regards to the adjustment of allocation thus far. So basically, one of my colleagues did indicate when they did the equitable share formula on page 59 and 56 how the formula is derived. So that mostly sort of influences that allocation. And you will see that it's not only Western Cape, it's mostly...
Kindly bring the mic closer to you.
Oh, sorry. It's not only Western Cape that is facing a challenge of urban migration, also other urban areas like Gauteng, like I indicated in my presentation, Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. So that sort of speaks to the issue of, of where the resources are mostly people who want a better life, so they tend to move to such areas, and then obviously they face a backlog on providing essential services to those people. With regard to infrastructure at municipal level, how then they can improve in that aspect. It's just that you would see if you would travel around the country, as most people are going to be doing now during the Easter. There are just many municipal projects, infrastructure projects, even municipal road that are, the budget is allocated, the work is done, but the work is of such a poor quality. If you drive this year and then maybe you skip next year and then you go after 2 years, you will find that the road, which is supposed to last, for 30, 20 years, it's already been dilapidated. It shows that. So that's where the issue of consequence management needs to come in, to ensure that people who are responsible for those areas actually deliver the right adequate infrastructure that actually contributes to society and as well as economic growth. The director has already talked about that, why it is important to look at the SONA and how then it is translated into the DORA. The main reason therefore is just to see where the planning of the government, whether it's aligned, so that whatever the president then announces, is it then reflected in the budget. The issue with municipal billing is quite a challenge in most areas, like we indicated, that if people don't know how much they need to pay, or the municipality itself does not even know that you owe them, the likelihood of a person paying is reduced. Then, which means then we put more pressures on all these other other spheres of government. With the issue of ring-fencing water and electricity that Honorable Majola raised. So this basically is a process. I worked in the city of Joburg for more than 7 years. So they've got utilities like what we call Joburg Water, where it's responsible for water. They've got City Power. That type of entity is responsible for provision of electricity. So it doesn't actually mean that they reinvest all the the revenue that they raise through that particular. It just means then they've got specialized, more dedicated people who are dealing with that aspect. So I think that's what not speaking on behalf of the government, that is what the proposer, they want to use that type of mechanism to be able to improve services. So the part for honorable members will then to provide stringent oversight in that regard to ensure that those processes are not abused. Finally, with the issue of municipal interference with regards to Section 139, it was not the way that is highlighted in the report as well as in the research is that some municipalities are then put in under these interventions when actually there is not need, or maybe all the boxes have not been ticked because a political decision has been taken somewhere else, and then this municipality then end up in this Section 139. That's why we are saying when a municipality is put under 139 administration or 150, then there should be specific, tangible results and time period on which those issues are need to be raised. The time issues when the administrator comes in and when they will go and what type of winnings or key achievement is expected in that regard. Thank you.
Lwazigazi, Jeff, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Yankees. There was a question around public employment programs, though I will not be able to respond on behalf of Treasury. But what I want to say about this program is that we acknowledge the spending in public employment programs. However, it is unlikely to elevate the chronic unemployment affecting millions of people, and many whom have been jobless for a year or longer. Thank you.
Thanks, Lwazi. Come in.
Thank you, Dr. DJ. I'm glad that the honorable member had raised an issue around the township economy, as I think that's also quite important. But I often find that in our conversations about the township economy, what we tend to forget is that the very nature of the township economy is quite informal, and I don't think as government we've invested enough resources towards understanding the sector in terms of data collection, how many SMMEs operate within the township economy, what services do they provide, right? And the other second issue as it relates to government support for township economies and SMMEs is that we also tend to impose the same stringent conditions that commercial banks impose on SMMEs. So whether you're looking at institutions like CEDA or the CFA, etc., they still impose the same sort of conditionalities around collateral, etc., which we know that a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs operating within the township economy do not have access to those sort of collateral, etc., land, assets, etc. So we really need to rethink how government, from a developmental point of view, what interventions could government put to ensure that we help informal economies, not just on the financing side. We also know that the South African economy is quite concentrated, right? You've got major big businesses dominating economies, which crowd out a lot of SMMEs. We're seeing an emergence of malls, shopping malls and centers going into townships, and we need to also think about what are the implications of those sort of things in terms of the township economy. Then there was the question around Eskom and its sustainability. As I had mentioned earlier on, the debt relief intervention was intended to help Eskom in terms of at least helping improve the entity, the utilities balance sheet, so that if you are able to reduce, if they are able to reduce their debt, they would at least be able to free up space for important maintenance and infrastructure investment. But before I even speak further of Eskom, I do want to say that the reality is that we are going to continue we are, whether we like it or not, we do have to invest in Eskom. I do not think that IPPs will secure our energy security, and Eskom is simply too important for us to allow it to fail. And the issues of Eskom did not just start over the past few years with state capture, etc. What has happened is that we, as government, we tend to wait for for infrastructure to tear down. We do not invest in necessarily maintenance. We don't invest in expansion, and we often tend to address things retrospectively. And for a number of years, we've been calling for investment in Eskom and ensuring that Eskom invest in infrastructure so that it's able to service the growing population. So the question around its sustainability, when we look at what has happened since the debt relief, Eskom's financial position has improved. In fact, they have reduced their losses in the 2024 financial year, and they also project to be profitable in 2025. But however, there still are challenges, as honorable members are well aware, around the debt that municipalities owe to Eskom, around 95 billion as of the latest figure that was in 2024. And thus growing municipal debt certainly does threaten the sustainability of Eskom and its ability to invest in infrastructure. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can I please just add one more? I forgot to answer one question. There was a question around the grants, and I think, members, what is really concerning is that in terms of the projected number of grant recipients, the numbers, in a way, for lack of better words, do not make sense. So the number of beneficiaries for the child support grant are only supposed to, or expected to, increase by 0.2% in the medium term. I think members should be concerned with this because it raises questions about, are parents being blocked in a way from accessing the child grant? Why is the number increasing so little given the number of children that are going to be born in the medium term? What is happening in that sector? And how does it even intersect with home affairs and children's registrations of births and so forth? So that's the one area I think that members really need to be concerned about, that why is it that the number of recipients for the child grant are growing at 0.2%, given the high unemployment figures that we see in our country, given the cost of living crisis that parents are facing. The other one is that in terms of the old age grant, that is going to grow steadily over for the future, because South Africa's population demographic, our demographics are shifting. So we can't be expecting that the number of old age grant recipients are going to decline because we've got an aging population. So when we think about the grants, what's changing, and also to raise to members that the foster care grant has systematically been declining. So fewer and fewer people are either fostering children, or fewer and fewer people are having access to these grants. So, but overall, the picture in terms of grants is that the number of recipients is not growing as rapidly as one would like to think, given the context in which we are operating in South Africa. So to highlight to members that, yes, the old age grant recipients will increase, but why is the child support grant so small, and why are the other grants also declining? The only one that increases is the care dependency grant at 3.9% in the medium term. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Chair, I just want to quickly wrap up some of the last points that I think we left out here. Just to add that actually, on what Sep was saying, Eskom, there has been the expectation that it is investing also on renewable energy. It's also part of the investment. I think we need to assess how far that is going as well. The issue of the infrastructure, Chair, I think I understand there's been this infrastructure strategy has been developed for the country. And I feel that as a house as well, we need to have a very clear oversight mechanisms around that. And particularly seeing that, how does that translate to our responsibility when we look at the three spheres? How distributive it is towards the three spheres? Because we have a serious infrastructure challenges, as you mentioned, the roads and so on aspects. So as an NCOP, we need to develop our oversight, specific focus on that strategy, because it's a very clear national strategy between the presidency and the public works. So we need to really see that is implemented, and particularly when we look at the budget like this to say, how does that infrastructure strategy influences this budget, and how can we oversight it? There was a point around the tax per person. Just want to comment that I heard the Minister of Finance, correctly last week saying we must look on both sides, the income and the spending side. Certainly, the tax, it's a very interesting point. I know, we had a very back of envelope discussions back then where somebody saying, on average, in higher end, I would probably pay 66% of, over 66% or so. It's a very hypothetical figure. Obviously, looking at the local government or various taxes. But I think also equally what we have seen in the literature that actually high earners a lot of times benefit a lot from the public spending than the low income earners as well. So when you compare the two, you find that actually it does show, it exaggerates the inequality in all aspects. You find that high earners would be able to drive on better roads and so other public spending in that particular. But I think, as Bush was saying, we need to really decompose that debate and really get to the bottom, because I think the debate around tax is not a South African debate. It is an international debate now. Where should we get more revenue? And I think we can't run away from it in South Africa, particularly our situation where we are a bit outlier in many of some of the aspects. So I think it's a good thing that South Africa and Parliament are debating the issue of taxes and where we're going to get additional revenue. And I feel we need more revenue because we have this good plan that's set out in place. It needs to be funded. The question around the skills and the level of spending around ensuring that, again, the issue of infrastructure comes in again. You know, we need to see to it the infrastructure strategy deals with some of these key priorities, because investing in education, it's an investment in future labor and also investment in quality of life and so on. So that has to come into place. But specifically around skills, we did comment that the advised the committee last week, I think 2 weeks ago, that there was a discussion around a need to have a skills master file. So we need to call the Minister of Higher Education, or one of the ministers, I forgot which minister, because now I know that they've been separated down, to provide that master file, because that also guides in terms of spending where the priorities are lying. Because at the end of the day, it's about prioritizing the skills that we say the economy needs and so on. So that master file, well, let's maybe get it as house and then maybe get, see whether is it aligned to the spending in particular, because that will help us a lot in oversight. And lastly, the issue of charging, just simple consequences. Chair, sometimes some of the big companies, what they do, they rather pay the costs of contravening the legislation, the laws. So we need to have very punitive consequences measures, and it has to come from Parliament. If you're not passing through the prices, the savings, there has to be very consequences, and it has to be very harsh from a Parliament perspective. And I think it's a very important point. Yesterday, the Minister of Trade announced additional allocation in the township economy, but again, it's not enough. We must ask him, how is that going to transform the townships? We need to focus a lot on the how part, and then we can hold him accountable based on what he'll be saying. Look, we're going to have 40 billion or 48 billion or whatever the case was be. This is what it means for township economies and how we can review that after 5 or 3 years. Chair, we end there. We really emphasize that our point here is to say we need to satisfy ourselves as National Council of Provinces that Division of Revenue and Appropriations bill as they are they really going to help us realize the midterm development strategies? And we do see a lot of improvement in particular, but we need to go deeper and say how we going to ensure that we can hold government accountable using these allocations in particular. Not only for allocations, but also for the quality of service that needs to be delivered. We thank you so much for the opportunity. Sorry it took so long, but we felt like it's important to raise this point. Thank you so much once more for the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you very much once again, PBO led by Dr. Jantjies. Mekarego, I don't know if you have a comment based on the deliberations that have been taking place from your side. You may come in.
Thank you, Chair. Probably I'll comment only on 2 things. Probably in particular, the issue of the equitable share, and perhaps the issue of infrastructure delivery as well. Just to indicate that all provinces are compensated for the migration, including Western Cape, including Gauteng. Those are the provinces where we see majority of migration too. So after every year, the data is updated. And I think what we've already made the point is that the only data that was not available at the time we updated the formula was the income and expenditure survey that talks about the poverty data. But it has since been released end of Jan, so it means for the next MTF period for both local government and provincial governments, the equitable share formulas will be updated. So that is important. So, and members should recall that as much as there might be, let's say, a pressure in a particular department in a province, equitable share formula is not a budgeting tool. The fact that I think the component is 48%, and as we have seen, on average, the allocations are around approximately 42%. It doesn't mean that that province will allocate that funds to that particular department. For example, if you look at all provincial 9 departments of education, 7 provinces, education get the highest share of their budget. If you look at Gauteng and Western Cape, the biggest share goes to health. So those are the choices that the province has made. So therefore, national government cannot be blamed for the choices that the province makes. So I thought I should make that point because generally when there's an issue of the learners getting classes in January, a crisis, then it's like national government not provide the funds, but it's the issue that the equitable share is an unconditional grant that the province has a prerogative on how to allocate it, so that's important. So I think on the issue of gross capital formation declining, I think this one, I mean, there's been funds allocated and the minister spoke about, I think, 1 trillion of budgets, and there are a number of conditional grants, whether it's at provincial government and local government. And I think members of the Select Committee on Finance saw yesterday that we did say in the past 5 years, just on a provincial government grants, 12 billion was returned by provincial departments. So therefore, in our view, in a way, we would say, as much as there's a crisis, or obviously we need to accelerate infrastructure, but there's a problem of planning and delivery as well. So that's the biggest thing that needs to be corrected. And once that is done, we believe that the money that we currently have in the system can go a long way in addressing some of these issues, including the value for money that PBO spoke about, that the quality of roads and so on. So I think those are really what needs to happen, and we're hoping that NCOP committees will help us in that regard with regards to the, the provincial and local government spheres to ensure that there's value for money for infrastructure projects delivered. So I thought I should indicate that. So therefore, in our view, we would say as much as there's a need to invest more, and we continuously do so on CAPEX, but the spending must be of quality, and institutions must plan better as well. So I thought I should just speak on those two, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues, honorable members, colleagues from the PBO, National Treasury, stakeholders present today, media houses with us today. I think this brings us to a close of the discussions around the division of revenue, the appropriation bills, and the Eskom bills. And further note that next week on the 16th of April, we will be having our public hearings. And so far, we've only received 2 submissions, and it is a bit worrisome because the closing date will be on the 14th of April, which is next week, Monday. A lot of issues have been raised, members interacted, and such interactions are really assisting in members of parliament or members of the select committee in doing their work. When we go for public hearings, at least it will be easier for members to can be able to engage going forward before the finalization of these bills, based on the discussions that happened prior the process of adopting the bills. Allow me, members, to kindly release colleagues from PBO, National Treasury, and the journalist, and everyone that is not part of the committee, so that we can deal with the previous minutes of this committee before we close the meeting. Thank you very much, colleagues. You may leave us. I want them to be read. The Chairperson of Finance, Honorable Ndlovu, Honorable Brett and Honorable Swart. We are on the first set of minutes. Colleagues, I hope you had time to go through the minutes. Honorable Brett and Honorable Swart, the meeting has started. Yes, Mr. Swart. No problem. Let's give you a minute or two while Mr. Nodada is looking for the minutes. Colleagues, remember the minutes have long been sent to us. And at some point, we requested that you make inputs and corrections where you think they need to be done. And because so far we've not received any corrections, any inputs of the minute, I take it that the minutes are a true reflection of what transpired in those 5 meetings. So it will not take us 10 to 15 minutes to deal with the minutes. Colleagues, I think we are having
Sorry,
a
Chairperson,
technical
honorable
problem.
members. I don't know what's happening with the system now. All of a sudden, I can't flight the minutes.
Maybe the problem is with your gadget.
We've been using it since, but all of a sudden now.
Colleagues, can I give you 2 minutes to locate the minutes in your gadgets, and then we can take a reference from the minutes that were circulated to our emails? Or Mr. Nodada, if you have them, just send them on the group for easier reference of members. Estelle, kindly post the minutes on the group.
Person.
Yes, Mr. Swart.
I just wanted to, just for clarity, I can't remember, when did we receive the minutes? Yesterday or the day before yesterday?
I think we've been receiving the minutes every week, but remember we had to deal with them last week. So they've been sending us the minutes every week.
Okay. Oh, sorry, because I didn't read
I
it.
understand. That's why I'm saying, I get we receive a lot of emails on daily basis. So it might be difficult for you to track them down. Hence, I request that they must just post it maybe on the WhatsApp group. Are you winning, Estelle? You would agree? Depost them group. You found?
Mr. Swart, the latest time we sent it was this morning with the questions from the
Chair.
Is it all of them?
Yes, all 5 sets with previous questions were sent early this morning, 6:30.
With the closing at 9.
Honorable Chair.
Yes. I think even this, no, this was to Estelle. If you can look at the email that was sent to you from Estelle this morning on the possible questions from Mr. Dlomo, there was an attachment of minutes. Honorable Swart, that responds to your question. Just check today's mails. Yes, we are on the 10th of December, but all members must be able to get the minutes. The email was sent this morning at 6:29. Ngumalo. Okay, honorable members, let's give Mr. Nodada a chance to go through the first set of minutes, which was on the 10th of December last year, where we dealt with the adjustment appropriation bill, the special appropriation bill, and the proposed division of revenue and conditional grants allocation to provinces and municipalities. Do you have them, Estelle? If members have found their minutes, can we check the first page so long? The second page. Deal with the attendance and apologies of members. The introduction. The consideration of adjustment appropriation bill, where Mr. Majola, yes, the 10th of December, where Mr. Majola rejected the report of the committee, consideration on the special appropriation bill. Bullet point number 4, consideration of draft report on proposed division of revenue and conditional grant. We then adopted the minutes for the 6th of December on the day. The first term program was tabled as a draft before the committee. The closing remarks. Can I get an indication whether we accept the minutes or not? Honorable Swartz. Honorable Ndlovu.
I second chair, so long as it has got the part that Honorable Majola has confirmed.
Minutes are duly adopted. Can you go to the second set of minutes, Mr. Nodada? Are you still struggling? Estelle, are you in a position? No, members have their, we are only waiting for you, colleagues. Members are ready. Can we go to a, can you go to a set of minutes for the 14th of March? The meeting was held at Good Hope Chamber. Honorable Ngumalo.
Much. I move for the adoption of the minutes as the true reflection of what transpired on the 14th of March 2025. Thank you.
Honorable Ngumalo moves. Do we have a seconder to the minutes? Which ones are those? The 14th. Honorable Ndlovu.
I second chair, thank you.
Minutes duly adopted as a true reflection. This indicates that members have gone through their minutes as previously requested. And I was right to say that because we've not received any corrections or inputs on the minutes, it means it's a true reflection. Let's move to the 18th of March. The 18th of March was a joint meeting with the Standing Committee on Appropriations and both the Select and Standing Committees on Finance. It was a virtual meeting. We were dealing with the briefings for the 2025 budget with the PBO and the FFC. Agreed, colleagues? Honorable Ngumalo.
Chairperson, thank you once more. I move for the adoption of the minutes. Thank you.
Honorable Nxumalo moves, Honorable Ndlovu.
I second, Chair. Thank you.
Minutes duly adopted. The 26th of March, we had a briefing with the National Treasury on the Division of Revenue Bill, Appropriations Bill, and Eskom Debt Relief Amendment Bill. Our first consultation meeting on these three bills. We sat in the NCOP as 5. Honorable Majola. Honorable Majola moves. Honorable Nxumalo. The minutes are duly adopted. Honorable Ndlovu. Honorable Ndlovu.
Thanks, Chair. I was saying, I think the mover by Honorable Majola is not recorded because he just mumbling next to me. So it must be on the record, Chair.
It is okay, Honorable Majola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I formally move. Thank you.
Duly adopted by Honorable Majola and Honorable Nxumalo. On the 2nd of April, we had a briefing by Salga and FFC on the same bills put before us. Colleagues, the meeting was held at room 2, committee room in 90 Plain. We were engaging with the FFC. It was last week. FFC and Salga. Honorable Nxumalo.
Thank you, Chairperson. I move for the adoption of the minutes of the 2nd of April 2025. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Majola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I second the adoption of the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. The minutes are seconded. I think this brings us to the end of the adoption of minutes from the 10th of December to date. The meeting stand adjourned, and thanks for your time, colleagues. Honorable Brett.
Thank you. Honourable Chair, like yesterday in finance, can I request and propose that every meeting we take 2 minutes and adopt the previous meeting's minutes? Then we don't have this problem.
Yes, I think we should consider
please.
doing that, but most of the time it's dependent on how long you take on your deliberations. And if you can notice, we always go beyond 1 o'clock. And one would think that maybe you have things to do between the meeting and the sitting. But if you can just limit the time, it's a good suggestion. It's better that we deal with the minutes every time we sit in meetings.
And Madam Chair, the advantage, even if we go after one, but everything is still fresh in your mind. So you just look and say, oh yes, I remember, no, that's fine. So it's going to take a very short, or little extra time just to do that as we go.
I agree with you, colleagues. I agree with you that will start happening. But also I request that immediately when the minutes are forwarded to your good selves, kindly make corrections or anything that you would want to submit immediately so that they get to be rectified. When we come to the meeting, we adopt with the corrections that you would have made. Don't wait for the meeting to make your submissions or to rectify. Thank you so much, colleagues. The meeting is closed.